While walking through the forest, the hunter spotted an injured dog tied to a tree. As he approached, he was deeply moved and couldn't hold back his tears. The deer hunting season was the most anticipated by Dwight. The air was fresh and invigorating, and after a week of rain, he felt ready to face any challenge that came his way. His expectation was to find a robust deer around 70 kilos in full vitality. But as he followed the trail, he heard a strange sound, difficult to identify. A sharp whimper came from behind a large tree, and he ran to see what it was. The scene he found on the other side moved him deeply. An exhausted and malnourished dog was tied with a collar so tight that it injured her skin. Her face was covered with deep, inflamed cuts, but the most painful thing was seeing the litter of newborn puppies blindly trying to find warmth and milk from their wounded mother. As an experienced hunter and knowledgeable about wildlife, Dwight always prepared carefully for his expeditions in nature. At that moment, it was hard to know where to start. The dog was clearly scared of his presence and quickly placed her puppies behind her as she tried to stand. Dwight pulled a small package of jerky from his pocket and approached slowly, allowing her to smell the food. When she began to eat, he gently petted her to show that he wasn't a threat. Once she finally relaxed, Dwight opened his backpack, took out his hunting knife, and began working to free her. He had to act very carefully to avoid hurting her, and as he kept one hand on her to calm her, he felt the dog's body trembling with fear. Dwight slid the knife under the noose and patiently cut the rope, freeing her. When she was finally free, he noticed that the rope had left deep marks around her neck. However, instead of worrying about her own wounds, the dog immediately turned her attention to her frightened and traumatized puppies. Dwight waited as she sniffed each one of them, trying to calm them down. With no container nearby, Dwight emptied his lunchbox and filled it with water. The dog drank quickly, and Dwight soon gave her more water. The puppies began to cry, trying to get their mother's attention, and she sniffed each one. There were 5 puppies, but she showed a special interest in a smaller one, with a slightly darker and flatter face than the others, and who cried less. Taking advantage of the fact that the dog was focused on the puppies, Dwight carefully examined her wounds. He suspected that at least one of the cuts would need stitches, and that she would probably need vaccines to prevent infections. Although he didn't know how the dog had been injured, based on the type of wound, Dwight imagined she might have hurt herself while trying to break free. He found some more bandages in his backpack, and for now, that would be better than nothing. He unrolled the bandages and covered the most severe wounds. Whoever had abandoned her in the middle of the forest with her puppies, without food or water, better not think of coming back, Dwight thought. After finishing bandaging the dog, he wrapped the puppies in his coat and began to head back down the path he had come, towards his vehicle. As he had imagined, the mother followed him, worried about her puppies. Dwight walked slowly so as not to overburden her, considering how much she had suffered. When they reached the parking lot, the dog seemed hesitant. Perhaps she had been brought to this place in a vehicle similar to Dwight's and now distrusted his intentions. He opened the door and placed the puppies, still wrapped in the coat, on the back seat. The mother began to howl in distress, and her puppies, hearing her, started crying again. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." But the dog became even more agitated. When Dwight tried to gently guide her toward the car, she reared up on her hind legs and jumped a few meters away from the vehicle. The puppies, disturbed by their mother's behavior, began to move around and bark loudly, while she kept a safe distance from the car, barking at Dwight as if he were the villain of the story. Then he remembered that he had another advantage: a good supply of his homemade venison jerky. He had never encountered a dog that didn't like it, and since the dog had devoured the small bite he'd offered earlier, he was pretty sure she'd like this too. He took out a few pieces from the bag. As he approached, she began barking repeatedly. Dwight tossed her a piece and then stepped back, leaving the decision in her hands. When Dwight approached the puppies again, the mother was already walking by his side. He praised her and gave her another piece of jerky. This time, she took it directly from his hand. He praised her again and turned to look at the puppies. They were calling for their mother, and she tilted her head to listen to their voices. Though still showing some hesitation, she was beginning to trust that perhaps this human wasn't a threat, despite driving a somewhat suspicious vehicle. He took out more pieces of jerky from the bag and placed them on the back seat where the puppies were. The mother showed some nervousness with a few barks before jumping onto the back seat. He closed the door and took the wheel. Dwight's first stop was at Parkside Animal Clinic, where he faced another challenge, persuading the dog to enter the clinic. She seemed to have severe trust issues, which was understandable given the harsh treatment she had received from her previous owner. To convince her, Dwight had to use more venison jerky. The veterinarian examined the dog for postpartum complications and conducted a detailed checkup of each puppy, with special concern for one whose face was slightly deformed. The vet recommended that this puppy stay in the clinic for a few days for monitoring. Additionally, the veterinarian provided Dwight with a nutritional supplement and a specially formulated food for the mother, as well as a formula to add to the puppy's diet. He also treated the mother's wounds, which only required a few stitches. With the right diet and care, the dog quickly recovered, and all the puppies, including the one with the deformed face, remained healthy. As the dog recovered, Dwight was able to focus on her natural talents. Her intelligence and speed made her an ideal candidate to be a hunting dog. A friend who trained hunting dogs suggested that he take her for weekly training. The dog excelled in all the tests, and both realized that she had been a hunting dog before. Perhaps she had been abandoned because the pregnancy had slowed her down. Interestingly, the previous owner hadn't recognized her potential. The puppies grew up cute and healthy. They offered a high price for them, but Dwight chose not to sell them. The dog and her puppies stayed with him, and it's undeniable that the first piece of jerky had a huge impact on her loyalty. She recovered well from her injuries, though she was left with a scar on her throat that remained visible for quite some time. Over time, the painful memory of their first encounter would turn into something positive, and they could face the future without fear. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.